All right, let's get started. Hi, guys, and welcome to Word of the Day Wednesdays. I am author Nicole D. Miller. I have 3 books self-published. The most recent book is Stories for the Urban Soul, a compilation of short stories, novellas, and poetry depicting Black characters dealing with everyday life issues with a faith-based lens. So to learn more, please go to my website, NicoleDMiller.com. So as you guys know, every Wednesday at 6 p.m. I do a Word of the Day Wednesdays to piggyback off of my latest blog. The blog post that was released this Monday was The Fight for Good Education. This was definitely near and dear to my heart, a very transparent piece where I just share about some of the hardships my family and I face trying to keep me in good schools. And it's interesting, sometimes when you're in your journey, you don't realize that you have a story. And so when I look back on my younger years and just see the sacrifices that were made for me on behalf of my parents, my mother and my grandmother who raised me, I can see now, like, wow, we really overcame. So in my blog post, I share about a time period where we didn't have as much as my peers did, and we definitely didn't have what I have now. And even through it all, my parents were fighters, they were overcomers, they endured. And the big focus was to keep me in good schools. So back then, and I don't know if it's still like this today, I assume it is, but a lot of the better schools were just in the suburbs. So if you were in the city or in the inner city, you didn't have access to the resources, to the information, to maybe even the care of the teachers that people in suburban schools had. And the rule was that you couldn't live in the inner city and go to a suburban school. And unfortunately, there are systems in place that basically want to keep the poor and uneducated or undereducated, and this is one of the ways that they do it. So I was definitely affected by that. My grandmother was a huge advocate, a huge proponent for good education. And over she would tell my mother, like, she's not going to Cleveland Public. And, you know, there's no shade with Cleveland Public. Some of my best friends went to Cleveland Public. But I definitely heard stories of the lack. And I've heard stories of people who went to public school in the inner city and didn't get the tools that they needed to equip them for a collegiate career. And so for me, I can just look back and see how education was so vital for my purpose. Education was so necessary for the worlds that God was going to use me to navigate, specifically in middle class white culture. And my grandmother, whether she understood that or not, she knew enough that I needed to stay in suburban schools. So there were times where we didn't live in the suburbs. We did live in the inner city. There were times where I had to catch public transportation. And I just depict a specific time period where an actual teacher saw me getting on the bus and reported me. Like, okay, I guess she thought she was doing the right thing, but it's unfortunate that she didn't see this is a good student. This is someone who's in honors classes. Back then, I was one of the few people of color who was in honors classes. I remember even in high school being the first inductee as an African American, and so I was used to being the only. But it's unfortunate that all they saw was the rule, and they didn't see that the rule itself could be hindering people from flourishing who actually deserve a chance. So I kind of explained that in my blog post, just how these laws and systems and rules can be set in place to adhere to those who are privileged. So even though quote unquote public schools are free, there's still a cost to be paid, and the cost is you need to live in those residential areas. Well, what about the families who don't have the funds to pay the mortgage or pay the rent in those residential areas, but they still have children who are willing to do the hard work? And that's kind of what I dissect in my blog post. So I would love to hear feedback from you guys. If you have a similar story, if you know of stories where people were hindered, you know, maybe there was an issue in their school and they needed to be removed. You knew that they could get a better opportunity, or you could get a better opportunity. elsewhere, but these laws and these systems in place were trying to oppress you and keep you from doing that. Thankfully, God was so detailed with my journey, because not only did I move and own a home right around the corner from where we started out in, which is a huge testimony, but I also, own multiple businesses and went on to get an advanced degree. So there was so much fruit that came out of those hard sacrificial years, and I reflect on that in my blog. I'm just grateful that they kept their eye on the prize. My parents were a shining example of how to be resilient, of how to endure, of, how to not even bend to false laws. There are so many things that are in place in our systems that are not the heart of God, and that really do try to hinder the oppressed, and really do try to hinder those who are considered minorities. So all of that is in my latest blog post, The Fight for Good Education. Feel free to email me your story, NicoleDMiller1983@gmail.com. Feel free to subscribe to my blog, betterthanwine.net. Feel free to follow me on Instagram at Nicole.dmiller. Make sure you save, tag, share, all the things. I would love to connect with you. Be on alert. I have a lot of events popping up here soon. This month, I'm going to be in the Magic Marketing Conference with Jenna Lear. Definitely check out my IG page for more details. I think I have the flyer up on my website also. Next month, I'll be in a Meet the Author series. There will be a flyer out on that. And the month after, there is going to be an indie author expo that I'll be a part of. So that's cool. But the big news is that I'm on TV, you guys. I'll be featured on TCT, Tri-State Christian Television Network. There's a program called Julie with Friends, and it was supposed to air this month, but they pushed it back to next month. So I'll have to let you guys know when that drops. But yeah, so we're out here. It's tax season, so not only am I, pursuing the whole writing thing, books thing, it's definitely time to get those taxes done and bookkeeping. So it's definitely a busy season, but I appreciate all you guys' support. I see Breezy was on here. I see Mary is on here. Thank you guys for dropping in every Word of the Day Wednesdays, just piggybacking off my blog. Feel free to pop something in the comments. Feel free to email me. Anything you need, I'm here. So hope you guys enjoy the rest of your evening, and stay tuned for our next Word of the Day Wednesdays.